So we got a fair bit of abuse from different people over our best 15 selection of hurlers that hadn't won an All-Ireland hurling title in the last 25 years. We're probably going to get more abuse. It's par for the course now at this stage. But a common theme when we were going through the best 15 that hadn't won All-Ireland was a lot of Waterford players. So we capped our best 15 that hadn't won an All-Ireland hurling title in 25 years at 5 Waterford players. We could have probably went into double figures if we really wanted to. So it only makes sense that we do a best 15 Waterford hurlers that haven't won All Ireland.
Yeah, and I suppose the thing with the goals is, like, if we just start off with the goalkeeper, Stephen O'Keefe probably has to get it because he's the only Waterford goalkeeper, I think, of all time that's won an All-Star. And, you had Clinton Hennessy in there for a number of years. He had some good games. Of course, there was the Garvin McCarthy incident when he let in that early goal in 2004. But he was a good goalkeeper. But there probably isn't anyone who could realistically say I deserve to get in ahead of Stephen O'Keefe, because not only is he a good shot stopper, good puck outs, but he's also kind of that option behind who'll happily receive possession off you and start an attack from the back.
Yeah, he's kind of helped to kind of revolutionise the way goalkeepers play in hurling. And it's the first time, I would say, in Waterford's recent history anyway, where they've had a goalie where, barring some sort of surprise or something that we haven't foreseen, he'd be in goals for Waterford consistently or consecutively for the guts of 12 or 13 seasons if he wants to be. So I think he's an absolute shoo-in the goals, yeah.
Well, what about the full back line then? Because there aren't too many lads who you would say he's a definite option for full back, because at times it was a bit of a problem position. Noel Connors, he gets in there without a doubt. 3 All-Stars, brilliant player over the years, often trusted to mark the best player. So there'll be no debate about that. But full back line, I mean, you think of the names over the years, you might think of a few more. Sean Cullinan, he was in there in the 90s. Liam Lawler in the past decade or so, like, he was injured an awful lot, but I thought he was quite a good player. But there would have been a few others used, Ken McGrath thrown in there at one stage, Brick Walsh thrown in there, and even that in itself kind of tells you they didn't have a dominant fullback. Declan Prendergast, another one in there for a short period of time.
Yeah, and you mentioned Jerome Maher in a previous show as well, which was another lad that was kind of in that problematic number 3 shirt. They were never really able to settle on a number 3. Barry Coughlin obviously as well played there in the 17 All-Ireland as well. So that's kind of another. It's kind of been a position that has changed probably every year or every 2 years. To me, I think we probably have a surplus of backs, and I think if I was looking at someone who'd be able to fill the number 3 shirt and fill it fairly in a no-nonsense kind of manner and get your job done to a very high level, I'd be looking at moving back someone like Fergal Hartley, obviously an all-star in the half-back line, unbelievably solid there for the guts of a decade for Waterford. I think he'd probably be the best bet to go back full back. I think you have to pick someone who a kind of a standout kind of a name from maybe further out the field is going to have to move back. I just don't see us working with one of those full-backs that only played for a couple of years. So I think he's probably the best option.
And then maybe Owen Murphy as cornerback. Again, it's probably you're picking from, there's a certain amount of players that we're probably not thinking of straight off the bat. Like, I think Shane Fives has had some really good seasons. Not sure if he's done quite enough. Aidan Carney, I remember him with the orange locks coming out of his hair. Conor Gleeson's had some good games, hasn't always played back there. And I'm probably forgetting one or two, but it's not as if there are a whole pile of cornerbacks that are screaming out and saying, pick me.
No, and I think if Darragh Fives had remained fit over the past 7 or 8 seasons the whole time, he'd probably have a fair chance of slotting in somewhere in the back line, maybe in cornerback. But Owen Murphy, I'd say, was consistent, obviously, all-star in 2006. It's funny how you remember certain things about certain lads. When Lar kind of half nearly decapitated him and he half didn't, and Owen Murphy plopped on the ground like I literally didn't think he was going to move for about half an hour, and then he moved about 10 seconds later. But it's funny how you remember certain things about certain lads. But he'd very, very solid Waterford career, very consistent. It was rarely taken to town by anyone, and would have marked some of the best corner forwards. So I think consistently over the guts of a decade, he's probably the most reliable option there.
Are we doing the Bull feeling a bit of a disservice?
One of the great names, in fairness. He would have been more of a wing back, I'd say. And when we do move out to the half back line, like I presume, like there's no debate. Like Tony Brown is an absolute lock of 5, former hurler of the year.
Yeah, we're not going to debate that one at all. Only that some people might say his consistency means you could put him somewhere else on the field. But actually, just before nailing fully on the half back line, which is brilliant, and there's like attack minded players that you could play there if you wanted to put Ken McGrath there or Austin Gleeson there. But does it kind of say something about this Waterford team and how they've been over the last 25 years that the embarrassment of riches are all further up the field rather than actually in the defence? Even though I would contend in the last 3 or 4 years the reason that they've just come up a little bit short and had to play with spare men back the field is that they didn't have an excess of John Millans and Dan Shanahans and these types of players.
Yeah, we'll see when we get to the forward line. I'd say like the names that are in my head already are names from that vintage Naughties team. There's not too many forwards from the last, 5 to 6 years that are going to come into that forward line. Not off the top of my head anyway. And it's funny, yeah, it's going to be top heavy with that Naughties team. And we've talked in other episodes and other shows about Waterford not having that killer instinct in the forward line, not having that lad, not having the big Dan, or not having someone who's going to consistently get those big scores for you. So yeah, I'd say there's going to be a fair surplus of boys from the 2000 team there. I suppose a big part as well. We probably have 5 nailed down with Tony Brown, but like 6, 8, and 11, like it's a big debate about where you're going to put the brick, where you're going to put Kevin Moore, and where you're going to put Ken McGrath to balance the team as best possible.
Yeah, and I think we're not going to disagree on Tony Brown. Goes without saying, he played for 40 million years for Watford and don't think ever really let them down. Now, the Brick Walsh one, that's interesting, like, and you've just brought it up there. Do you play him in the half-forward line as a forager? Do you think of him in midfield where he operated a number of times? Do you kind of put him back centre-back where he took over from Ken McGrath and was so good for so long? I mean, and that's the whole thing. You could put Ken McGrath centre-back, him, iconic number 6, that kind of makes sense. That's the first thing you think of. But he played for, like we spoke to him on ourgame.ie, and he spoke about how he's played about 7 years in the half forward line, centre forward, scored 1-7 one day. Like, he is a brilliant player. But I think you're going to have to go with Brick at the back, because if you want a half forward line, the more threat that it carries, the better. Brick is rarely going to get you a goal. He got one in the All-Ireland semi-final against Cork. I think we all remember that in 2017. But other than that, if you've 2 brilliant centre backs, so why not make sure that you have a score in centre forward if you kind of have your pick?
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from. We have a lot of lads that are going to launch ball into that forward line probably when we put it down on paper there. Brick done more hurling at centre back than he did in the forward line, and I think it makes more sense to put him 6. Like, imagine having the prospect of Ken McGrath hitting 5 or 6 points from centre forward.
I think without doubt. Now then the problem is, who do we fit in? So our half-back line so far is Tony Brown, Brick Walsh, and then who's the number 7? So again, you could put Kevin Moore in there and he's going to do a very good job. You have to ask, does Tyke de Borca get into the conversation? I think Dara Fives, if he had to remain fit over the last number of years, he'd probably be someone we're talking about here. And does anyone else come into the picture? Like maybe people who are more kind of wedded to the players that were there 20 years ago might start talking about other players. Maybe they'd want Fergal Hartley out in the half-back line. Who are you sort of leaning towards when it comes to that other wing-back spot? No, and Austin Gleeson is someone who can also play wing-back.
Could play wing-back, but I think that's a bit of a pie in the sky selection if you put him wing back. It's the thoughts of, Austin Gleeson be brilliant centre back, wing back. Apart from the under-21 success, he hasn't really played there consistently over a period of time. So I think if he's going to be on the team, he has to be on the team where he's been playing, where he's played his best stuff for Waterford, which to me is in the forward line, probably half forward. Tyke de Borca was obviously all-star centre back in 15, but if you're putting him wing back, he's marking someone, and we're not playing 7 defenders. At least I don't think we are. So he's going to actually have to mark someone, which he hasn't done at county level, which would be a question mark for me. Someone that probably does come into the equation, unheralded and probably underrated, but always delivered and was invariably marking one of the opposition team's best forwards, is Phillip Atany, who obviously retired at the start of this year, didn't go back in with Waterford this year. His loss will be felt, no doubt, as the year goes on. I think he definitely comes into the equation. Doesn't have the all-star that De Borca has, but would offer you a huge amount. You know what you're going to get from wing back of him. Like his county career was, I think, 8 or 9 years, but he was unbelievably consistent over that 8 or 9 years. De Borca is not around as long and is a different type of player. I'm not sure if he fits in. Like, we already have brick mine in the house, so to speak. So I don't know if we need a De Borca in the half back line. I'd be edging towards Phillip Atany, probably.
Yeah, I think I'd go along with that too. He, like his brother Pádraig, also had one of those horror leg breaks that kept him out for a year and just came back brilliant form, especially around 2015. I remember he was very good. Then 2017, really good All-Ireland final man marking Joe Canning. Now, Canning started out well, but I think, and got a great point early on, but I think Phillip Atany won that sort of battle, even though obviously they lost the war eventually. So I think we'll agree on that one. So you have a half back line of Tony Brown, Brick Walsh and Phillip Atany. I think the midfield picks itself. I mean, Jamie Byrne and Kevin Moore.
Just on the half back line, a lot of people would say that Kevin Moore should be wing back. But I think when we move up the pitch, I think it makes more sense to have him midfield. I do. I think it makes more sense to have. He can play that defensive option and drop back at midfield, and also drive forward and get a couple of points a game. I cut you off there, but to me, Jamie Barnes an absolute lock at midfield. He should have been hurler of the year in 17. Was an all-star in 16 and 17. I think if he stays fit over the next 4 or 5 years, he's huge to Waterford. He's the stereotypical modern day midfielder. Can go box to box, is brilliant on the ball. Scored that brilliant goal against Kilkenny. Remember when he had the boss turned the wrong way in the 17 qualifier? I think he's absolutely class. Has only 6 or 7 seasons with Waterford, but over the next 4 or 5 could go down as one of their finest.
Yeah, and like he was unbelievable. Should have been hurler of the year in 2017. Kevin, like he was nominated, so was Kevin Moore. Kevin Moore will probably, even though he mightn't have the same, I don't know, isn't considered the same sort of maverick as Ken McGrath and John Mullane and Dan Shanahan and Paul Flynn and all these. Like he's been one of Waterford's best players. Like go back to that amazing qualifier against Kilkenny in 2013 when he's getting sick on the pitch. There's so many times that he's kind of stood out. He's played wing forward. I remember in 2010 he's played wing back, he's played centre back, he's played pretty much everywhere, but midfield is probably where you get his best stuff. Now I'll just run through the half forward line that we're looking at, but where we kind of, you know, we had to talk it over a few times. But so that midfield, Jamie Byrne and Kevin Moore, and then Owen Kelly, Ken McGrath and Austin Gleeson. That's a fairly good 5 in and around the 65 there.
It's serious, and I think when you go through the team, it's only you realise, you know, Brick, Kevin Moore, Ken McGrath, how flexible some of these lads are across the most important positions in the field. It's actually remarkable when you think about it. Like, there's not, maybe it's to their detriment that they've been moved around that much, but they've been unbelievable in a host of positions. That's some half forward line. So you have like Owen Kelly, who could shoot the lights out, has the option of moving in as well. Ken McGrath, as I said earlier, could easily end up with 4 or 5 in play in any given game, and Austin Gleeson, who can deliver anything, deliver that kind of sort of genius that you just have to have him on your team. And there's the capability, like with all 3 of those lads, you can put high ball down on top of them as well. So like it's a great luxury to have.
Stephen Mullumphey might remember he had a couple of unbelievable seasons, and he might be a lad where you think, right, move him in centre forward or something like that, move Owen Kelly out to midfield or inside. But like, how do you drop then the likes of John Mullane, who absolutely picks himself, Dan Shanahan at 14, who absolutely picks himself, and you can move him out again, goes back to that whole flexibility you're talking about, and Paul Flynn, who, right, he might have got a little bit slower in the last couple of years, but, you know, from 1992, I believe, when he started out, all the way up until, was it give or take 2008, maybe a slight bit longer, I'm not 100% sure on that. I mean, like, he was absolutely unbelievable.
That's some forward line. It's some 6 forwards to have, like, you have obviously the class of Flynn in the corner, Mullane, who just like terrorize most of the best defenders in the game, and they're obviously like real good kind of potent forwards, capable of getting Flynn regularly get 1-3 from play, Milan get 4 or 5, and then you have Big Dan on the edge of the square, who I think had the guts of 20 championship goals in his Waterford career, which is absolutely outrageous. That's those 6 forwards. Like you do well match up against any team now with those 6 forwards. That's a fair unit now there. Like you can easily see them clocking up 323, 324 in every game.
There's probably no one from the current generation, like Maurice Shanahan got an All-Star in 2015. But other than that, you could nearly kind of name in one hand other guys who could come into contention here. In fact, there's probably no one. So that inside forward line is an absolute lock. And I think other than that, we more or less have our team.
Yeah, Phillip Atany is the only one, obviously an All-Star as well in 17, as to the best of my knowledge. I'm almost sure he was anyway. He's the only one that would even come close. But when you look at it, you have Paul Flynn to hit frees, and you have Owen Kelly to hit frees. I think the team benefits more from Brick being back centre back and Kevin Moore being pushed up the pitch. Yeah, that's a fair 15. We've had to be creative with the full back, but I think we've solved it in the most logical kind of way. You weren't going to move Brick back. You weren't going to play Ken McGrath. It'd be ludicrous to play either of them at 3. So I think it kind of there's a fair balance to it as well.
And obviously, not everyone is going to agree with the team or the positions or whatever it might be. So please do let us know on Twitter at Shane Saint and at ML Verney.